Hello! We are so excited to show you our native speech capabilities. Welcome back to the English journey. Today, we are discussing a heavy mental burden that many of us carry every single day, the habit of overthinking about the past. My name is Anna, and I am here to guide you through the language of letting go and finding peace using clear, easy English.
And I am Abel. I'm so glad to be here with you, Anna. It is so exhausting when your brain keeps replaying old mistakes, bad choices, or embarrassing moments like a movie that never stops. Today, we want to talk about why our minds get stuck in the past and how we can use simple English habits to break free from regret.
That is a perfect way to describe it, Abel. A movie that never stops. And the difficult thing is, we did not choose to watch this movie. It just starts playing, sometimes at 3 in the morning when we are trying to sleep, sometimes in the middle of a meal, sometimes right when we are supposed to be enjoying a happy moment. That's the nature of overthinking about the past. It does not ask for permission, it simply arrives. And suddenly, you're 10 years back in time, reliving something painful.
Yes, and the strange thing is, Anna, we already know what happened. We were there. We lived through it. So why does the brain keep going back? Why does it feel like we need to watch the same moment over and over again?
That's such an important question, and I want to answer it carefully. The word we use in psychology for this behavior is rumination. Rumination means to think deeply and repeatedly about something, especially something negative. The word actually comes from how cows eat. A cow chews its food, swallows it, brings it back up, and chews it again. That's called ruminating. And when we talk about the human mind, rumination means we're doing the same thing with our thoughts. We're chewing the same painful memory again and again. Even though it's not giving us any new nutrition, it's not helping us grow, it's just the same old pain recycled.
I love that image, and it's so true. You keep chewing something that has no flavor left. There's nothing new there.
Exactly. And I want to start today with a metaphor, which is a way of comparing two different things to help us understand an idea better. I want you to think about driving a car. When you drive a car, you have a large windshield in front of you. The windshield is big and wide and clear because that's the direction you're moving. You need to see what's ahead of you. You need to see the road, the other cars, the curves, and the opportunities to turn. Now, behind you, there's a rear view mirror. The rear view mirror is small. It's useful, yes. It helps you see what's immediately behind you so you can stay safe. But here's the critical point. If you spend most of your time looking into that small rear view mirror instead of looking through the large windshield in front of you, what will happen?
You'll crash very quickly. You cannot drive forward while only looking backward.
Precisely. And yet, this is exactly what so many of us do with our minds every single day. Our windshield is the present moment, the opportunities we have right now, the conversations we could be having, the goals we could be working toward, the joy that is available to us today. And our rearview mirror is the past. It's small, it's already fixed. Nothing in that mirror can be changed. And yet, we spend hours staring into it, trying to see something different, trying to change what we see. And while we're doing that, our real life, the life happening right now through the windshield, is passing by without us.
That's honestly a little painful to hear because I recognize myself in that description. I know I do this. I know I spend a lot of time looking in that rear view mirror.
And you're not alone, Abel. Most people do this, and it doesn't mean there's something wrong with you. It's actually a very human thing. The brain is always trying to protect you. It replays past events because, on some deep level, it believes that if it analyzes the situation one more time, it might find a solution. It might find a way to go back and fix what went wrong. This is what I call the time machine illusion.
Oh, I want to hear about this, the time machine illusion. What does that mean exactly?
The time machine illusion is the subconscious, which means the part of your mind that works without you being fully aware of it. The subconscious belief that if you think about the past long enough and hard enough, you might somehow change it, like a time machine. Like if you replay the moment enough times, eventually the story will have a different ending. But of course, that's not how time works. The past is what scientists and philosophers call a closed system. It's finished, it's complete. Every word spoken, every decision made, every action taken in the past is locked in place, and no amount of thinking, worrying, or wishing will unlock it or rewrite it. The book is closed, Abel. You cannot go back and edit the chapters that are already written.
That actually helps me feel a little bit better and a little bit sad at the same time. Better because it means I can stop trying to change what cannot be changed. Sad because it means I have to accept that some things really did happen.
Yes, and that word, acceptance, is one of the most powerful words in the entire conversation about mental health and emotional growth. Acceptance doesn't mean you're happy about what happened. It doesn't mean you think the mistake was fine or that the painful experience was good. Acceptance simply means you stop fighting with reality. You stop arguing with what already is. Because when you argue with the past, you're having a battle that you'll always lose. The past will never change, but your energy, your peace, your present life, those things are deeply affected by how long you choose to keep fighting.
Speaking of past moments that stay with you, Anna, can I share something a little embarrassing? Because I think our listeners will really relate to this.
Please do. This is exactly the kind of honest sharing that helps people feel less alone.
Okay, so this happened several years ago. I was trying to practice my English, and I was at a small dinner party with some people I had just met. I really wanted to make a good impression. I wanted to show them that my English was getting better. So we were talking about food, and someone asked me what my favorite dish was, and I wanted to say that I really enjoy my mother's cooking. I wanted to describe her soup, but I got confused with the words, and instead of saying the soup was very hot, meaning it had a high temperature, I said it was very angry. I was trying to use the word hot, but I mixed it up in my mind, and I said the soup was very angry today.
Oh, I can imagine the room going quiet for just a second.
The entire table stopped, and then everyone laughed. And it wasn't cruel laughter, they were kind people, but I turned completely red. I felt so small, I wanted to disappear. And I laughed along with them because what else could I do? But inside, I felt so embarrassed. And here's the problem, Anna. That moment happened years ago. Years. And sometimes even now, I wake up in the middle of the night and that memory just appears out of nowhere. The soup was very angry, and I feel the embarrassment again, fresh, like it just happened this morning.
Abel, thank you so much for sharing that. And I want you to know something very clearly. That experience you just described, waking up and suddenly feeling the heat of an old, embarrassing memory, that is one of the most universal human experiences there is. Almost every person has a version of that story. A moment they said the wrong thing, chose the wrong word, made a social mistake, and that moment has been living rent-free inside their head ever since. That phrase, living rent-free, means something that stays in your mind without you inviting it, without you choosing it, and without giving you anything good in return.
Living rent-free, I like that. Because it really does feel like an uninvited guest who just moved into your brain and will not leave.
And the reason that memory keeps coming back is connected to something called emotional imprinting. When a moment involves strong emotion, especially embarrassment, fear, or shame, the brain marks that memory as important. It files it in a special place and checks on it regularly because the original emotion never got fully processed. You laughed in the moment, which helped you survive it socially, but inside, the feeling of shame was still sitting there, unresolved. And so the brain keeps returning to it, trying to process what happened, trying to understand if you are safe now, trying to reassure itself. The problem is, it is not very good at this. It just keeps replaying instead of actually resolving.
So what do I do? Because I genuinely do not want to be woken up at 3 in the morning by an angry soup memory anymore.
The first thing I want to teach you about is something I call the 5-minute thought box. This is a cognitive exercise, which means it is a mental exercise, something you do inside your mind to train your thinking. Here's how it works. Instead of trying to stop the thought completely, because fighting a thought often makes it stronger, you give the thought a specific, limited time. You say to yourself, okay, I'm going to allow myself 5 minutes to think about this. 5 full minutes. I'm going to sit with the memory, feel whatever I feel, and think about it as much as I want. But when the 5 minutes are over, I'm going to consciously, which means on purpose and with full awareness, pack that thought away and redirect my attention to something real and present in front of me.
So you're not pretending the thought doesn't exist, you're not running from it, you're just giving it a time limit.
Exactly. You're acknowledging the thought, which means you are recognizing it and saying, yes, I see you, I know you're there, but you're also taking back control of your mental schedule. When you say the thought can only have 5 minutes, you are drawing a boundary. And boundaries, even mental ones, are incredibly powerful. After the 5 minutes, you pick up something in the room. You feel the texture of the table in front of you. You smell your coffee. You look out the window at the actual sky, and you bring yourself back to the present moment.
That sounds manageable. I feel like I can actually try that. But Anna, I also want to talk about something bigger. Something that's not just embarrassing moments, but actual regret. Because I think a lot of our listeners might carry regret about big decisions. Choices they made or did not make, jobs they didn't take, relationships that ended badly, opportunities they missed.
This is so important to address. Regret is one of the heaviest emotions a person can carry, and it's also one of the most misunderstood. We often think that regret is useful. We think that if we feel bad enough about a past decision, somehow that will protect us from making mistakes in the future. But what actually happens is very different. When you spend your current energy, and I want you to think of energy as a limited daily resource like a phone battery, when you spend that battery on regret, you arrive at the present moment half charged or completely drained. And then the work of building your future, the learning, the connecting, the creating, all of that suffers because you have no energy left for it.
So regret is actually borrowing energy from your future self to pay for something your past self already spent.
That is a beautiful way to say it. You're taking from your future to grieve your past, and your present, which is the only place where real change is actually possible, gets left with nothing. And this is the true cost of living in regret. It's not just that you feel sad, it's that your ability to build something better is directly reduced by how much time and emotional energy you pour into what cannot be changed.
So how do we start to redirect that energy? How do we actually move it from the past to the present?
One of the most effective techniques is what psychologists call cognitive reframing. To reframe something means to put a new frame around it, to see it in a different way. Imagine a photograph. If you put it in a dark, heavy, ugly frame, the photo itself looks sad and heavy. But if you put the same photograph in a clean, simple, beautiful frame, suddenly the image looks different. The photo hasn't changed, only the frame has changed. And this is what we can do with our memories and our mistakes.
So instead of looking at the mistake as just a failure, we look at it differently. We change the frame.
Exactly. Let me give you a very practical example of this. Instead of telling yourself the story of, I ruined everything, which is the old, dark, heavy frame, you consciously choose to tell yourself, I learned a hard lesson. Those two sentences describe the same event, but they create completely different psychological realities. I ruined everything places you in the role of the victim. It makes you passive. It says the story is over and the ending is bad. But I learned a hard lesson places you in the role of a survivor, even a student. It says there was difficulty, yes. There was pain, yes. But I came through it with something valuable.
And that shift in language actually changes how you feel about yourself.
It changes your entire internal story, which is called your self-narrative. Your self-narrative is the ongoing story you tell yourself about who you are, what you are capable of, and what your life means. When your self-narrative is full of ruined and failed and wasted, you begin to believe that is who you are. But when you deliberately, which means on purpose, shift your language to learned and grew and survived, your identity begins to shift too. And language learners know this better than most people because you are already practicing the power of changing your words to change your world every single day.
That is so true. Every time I learn a new word, it actually helps me think a new thought. I could not think clearly about certain ideas until I had the right word for them.
That is one of the most profound truths about language learning. Words are not just labels for things that already exist in your mind. Words actually create new spaces for thought. When you learn the word rumination, suddenly you can look at your own behavior and say, oh, that is what I am doing. I am ruminating. And that moment of naming it gives you distance from it. You are no longer inside the loop. You are standing outside of it, observing it. And that small distance is where your freedom begins.
Anna, I want to ask about something that feels very vulnerable to talk about, but I think it is really important. What about forgiving yourself? Because I think a lot of people, and honestly, I include myself here, are much harder on themselves than they would ever be on a friend. If my friend told me he made an embarrassing language mistake at a dinner party, I would laugh with him. I would say, it's totally fine. It happens to everyone. You're doing great. But when it happens to me, I say things like, how could you be so stupid? You always embarrass yourself. You will never be fluent.
What you just described has a name. It is called the self-compassion gap. The gap between the compassion, which means the kindness and understanding that we give freely to others, and the compassion we refuse to give to ourselves. And this gap is one of the biggest obstacles to mental and emotional growth. Research in psychology consistently shows that people who practice self-compassion, which means treating themselves with the same warmth and understanding they would offer a good friend, actually make fewer repeated mistakes, not more. Because when you feel safe enough to acknowledge a mistake without crushing yourself for it, you can look at it clearly, understand what went wrong, and genuinely learn from it. But when you attack yourself, your brain enters a kind of defensive state, and it becomes much harder to learn anything from the experience.
So being hard on yourself does not actually make you improve faster. It does the opposite.
It often does exactly the opposite. Shame, which is the feeling that you are fundamentally bad or wrong as a person, tends to freeze growth. It makes people want to hide, avoid, and not try again. But self-compassion, the simple act of saying, I made a mistake and I am still a worthy person who is trying and growing, that creates the psychological safety needed to take new risks and keep learning. And for language learners specifically, this is absolutely essential. Every language learner makes mistakes, every single one, without exception. Mistakes are not signs that you are failing, they are evidence that you are actively trying to communicate, which is the most important thing.
That is so true. Every time I learn a new word, it actually helps me think a new thought. I could not think clearly about certain ideas until I had the right word for them.
That is one of the most profound truths about language learning. Words are not just labels for things that already exist in your mind. Words actually create new spaces for thought. When you learn the word rumination, suddenly you can look at your own behavior and say, oh, that is what I am doing. I am ruminating. And that moment of naming it gives you distance from it. You are no longer inside the loop. You are standing outside of it, observing it. And that small distance is where your freedom begins.
Anna, I want to ask about something that feels very vulnerable to talk about, but I think it is really important. What about forgiving yourself? Because I think a lot of people, and honestly, I include myself here, are much harder on themselves than they would ever be on a friend. If my friend told me he made an embarrassing language mistake at a dinner party, I would laugh with him. I would say, it's totally fine. It happens to everyone. You're doing great. But when it happens to me, I say things like, how could you be so stupid? You always embarrass yourself. You will never be fluent.
What you just described has a name. It is called the self-compassion gap. The gap between the compassion, which means the kindness and understanding that we give freely to others, and the compassion we refuse to give to ourselves. And this gap is one of the biggest obstacles to mental and emotional growth. Research in psychology consistently shows that people who practice self-compassion, which means treating themselves with the same warmth and understanding they would offer a good friend, actually make fewer repeated mistakes, not more. Because when you feel safe enough to acknowledge a mistake without crushing yourself for it, you can look at it clearly, understand what went wrong, and genuinely learn from it. But when you attack yourself, your brain enters a kind of defensive state, and it becomes much harder to learn anything from the experience.
So being hard on yourself does not actually make you improve faster. It does the opposite.
It often does exactly the opposite. Shame, which is the feeling that you are fundamentally bad or wrong as a person, tends to freeze growth. It makes people want to hide, avoid, and not try again. But self-compassion, the simple act of saying, I made a mistake and I am still a worthy person who is trying and growing, that creates the psychological safety needed to take new risks and keep learning. And for language learners specifically, this is absolutely essential. Every language learner makes mistakes, every single one, without exception. Mistakes are not signs that you are failing, they are evidence that you are actively trying to communicate, which is the most important thing.
I wish someone had told me that years ago, Anna. I think I was so afraid of making mistakes that sometimes I just stayed quiet when I should have practiced. I let the fear of embarrassment stop me from speaking.
And that's one of the saddest costs of overthinking the past. Not just the energy you lose, but the moments you miss, the conversations you don't have, the risks you don't take, the connections you don't make, because the memory of an old embarrassment is loud enough to silence your voice in the present. This is why breaking the cycle of overthinking about the past is not just about feeling better emotionally. It's a practical, real-world skill that directly affects the quality of your life and your growth.
So when we put all of this together, when we look at everything we've talked about today, what is the central thing you want people to take with them when they finish listening to this conversation?
The central thing is this: the past is real, but it's over. Your feelings about the past are real and they deserve acknowledgement, but those feelings don't have to be your permanent home. You can visit the past, the way you glance briefly into a rearview mirror, to understand where you've been, to extract the lesson, to honor what you lived through. But you cannot live in that mirror. You cannot build anything there. The only place where life is actually happening, where change is actually possible, where joy, connection, and progress can exist, is in the present moment. And every minute you spend fully in the present is a minute you are giving to your future self. Not the self who made a mistake years ago, not the self who said something embarrassing at a dinner party, the self who is growing, learning, choosing better, and building something real and beautiful, one present moment at a time.
I think what moves me most about everything you said today is that it's not about pretending the past didn't happen. It's not about forgetting or denying. It's about choosing where to put your attention. And attention is something you can actually control, even when the memory feels so loud.
That is the most important insight of all, Abel. Attention is a choice, not always an easy choice, especially when old emotions are strong and loud, but always, ultimately, a choice. And every time you choose to redirect your attention from what was to what is, from what you cannot change to what you can actually do right now, you are practicing one of the highest forms of mental strength. You are not running away from your past. You are walking confidently toward your future, and that is the greatest gift you can ever give yourself.
And for everyone listening today, I hope this conversation gave you the language and the permission to stop being so hard on yourself, to close the chapters that are finished, and to trust that the next pages of your story, the ones still being written, can be something worth looking forward to.